Ok. Aspettiamo a Marco.
Ci siamo. Ci siamo.
Okay, so we switch to English now. Thank you everybody who's already online. We're going to wait just 1 or 2 minutes before other people arrive, and also people arrive to the and also people can start joining in our Facebook, our YouTube event. So just 1 minute, please. Thank you to all of you who have been very punctual. Okay. So we have 25 people now connected. I think we could begin. Is it okay with you, Professor Henry?
It's fine with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome to everybody, and to your, of course, to your guest, Ricardo Campa. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to begin now. First of all, welcome to the first event of the webinar series between trans and post-humanism, which is organized by the Dirpolis Institute here at Scuola Superiore Santa Ana. The name of the presentation today is Unlimited Life, the Evolution of an Idea, which will be given by Professor Ricardo Campa from the Jagiellonian University, Poland. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. And we will also have a comment and discussion by Professor Barbara Henry from Scuola Superiore Santa Ana. Since this is the first session, and before introducing our speakers, I would like to briefly present this webinar series. And as mentioned, this series is organized by the Dirpolis Institute at Scuola Santa Ana, and it's coordinated both by Professor Barbara Henry and me. And the series consists of 5 webinars that will take place throughout this year. So here you can see the calendar for the 5 sessions. Already the first 3 before the summer already have dates and time, and for the sessions after the summer we still have to decide for the date and time, but we will let you all know in due time. And the aim of this webinar series is to explore the encounters and differences between transhumanism and posthumanism. These 2 concepts have been gaining popularity in the last decades, motivated by radical innovations in the fields of information technology, robotics, biosciences, etc. And despite some initial common grounds, these 2 terms have grown apart, setting some significant differences in terms of philosophical, ethical, political frameworks. So the idea of the 5 webinars that compose the series is to examine these encounters and differences in a series of different fields: philosophy, ethics, aesthetics, art, media, in order not just to highlight the differences and encounters, as I said, but also to see how this debate has permeated a series of academic and cultural fields. Each session will have a main speaker, an invited main speaker, and a discussant and commentator from here, from the Scuola Sant'Anna. So I would like to thank everybody involved in the organization of this event, Professor Barbara Henry, Professor Fiorella Battaglia, also everybody from the Communications Office and the IT support here at Scuola Sant'Anna, and also to thank all the discussants from Sant'Anna that will contribute to this event during this year. And finally, I would like to thank all of the attendees who are joining us today. Some practical information before we begin. The event is held on this platform that's called the WebEx event, and it's also being broadcasted on the school's YouTube channel, where it will remain also registered afterwards. We will first have the main presentation by Professor Campa, around 40-45 minutes. Then the discussion and comments by Professor Barbara Henry, around 20-25 minutes. And this should give us 30 to 40 minutes for a debate afterwards. You can, all the participants can ask questions or make their comments using the Q&A function on the right hand of the screen. And obviously you don't have to wait till the end to write your questions. You can write them whenever you have them. So without further delays then, I'd like to introduce Professor Ricardo Campa, whom I also want to thank enormously for accepting this invitation to this event and being here with us to discuss these topics. I will stop sharing now, and I'll give the permission for Professor Campa to share his screen while I introduce him. Professor Ricardo Campa is a professor of sociology at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow and director of the History of Ideas Research Center at the same university. He founded and is currently honorary president of the Italian Transhumanist Association, served as director of the World Transhumanist Association between 2006 and 2008, and is fellow of the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technologies. His research focuses mainly on philosophy and sociology of science, technology studies, medical sociology, bioethics, futurism, transhumanism, and the history of ideas. Professor Campa is an extremely productive writer. In recent years, he has authored the following books. I'm just going to mention from the last 4 or 5 years. L'arte di passeggiare e fare la rivoluzione per una sociologia del flaneur, eterna giovenezza, il ritorno di un sogno antico tra studi scientifici e dilemmi etici, credere nel futuro, il lato mistico del transumanesimo, della bellezza dei corpi, il risveglio della sensualità pagana, Still Thinks Robot Can Do Your Job, Essay on Automation and Technological Unemployment, Le armi robotizzate del futuro, il problema etico, la società degli automi, studi sulla disoccupazione tecnologica e il reddito di cittadinanza, e creatori e creature, anatomia dei movimenti pro e contro gli OGM. Professor Campa, grazie. Thank you again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen now and my PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if you can already see it. Is it visible?
Yes, It's
Okay,
perfect.
thank you for the flattering presentation. And as you can see, the title of my presentation is Unlimited Life, the Evolution of an Idea. So first of all, we need to start for a definition of this concept, of this idea. So in several different expressions I use to indicate this concept, like unlimited life, indefinite lifespan, extreme longevity, or eternal youth. And these are terms that represent the continuation of life without the limit or beyond the limit of biological aging. As you can see on the left, you see the cover of a book, Ending Aging. Is a classic of this field, written by Over the Green and Michael Ray. And so you understand immediately the concept of unlimited life is related with anti-aging therapies. It's important to understand that there is a difference between immortality or eternity, which belong to another field, the field of religion, and unlimited or indefinite lifespan, which belongs to the field of science. And the second does not imply an inability to die of other causes. Basically, if we manage to stop aging, it would be impossible to say how long we live. So our life would be unlimited or indefinite, but sooner or later something may happen that kill us, like an accident, a virus, or a person may kill us, or whatever, or a natural catastrophe. So if you have a look at the back cover of the book written by Over the Green, you can see that people may live, for instance, 1,000 years. This could be a bit hyperbolic, if we consider the state of art of the research in this field now. So it's a kind of optimistic view of the future. Still, 1,000 years, well, 1,000 years, we will have the answer during the presentation, because as you can understand, we can tackle this problem from different angles, a different perspective. One perspective, one angle is the technical one. So is this is it feasible or not? Will we ever manage to solve the problem or not? This would imply a discussion of biomedicines and other related sciences. A second question could be, is it good or bad for the individual? So we may raise the ethical problem. Is it good or bad for the community? So we may raise the political problem. In my present, of course, it would be nice to discuss all these problems, but we cannot have to make a choice, and I decided to discuss this sociological aspect and try to give an answer to the sociological problem, the sociological issue from the point of view of the history of ideas. If you hear my presentation by Claudio, I'm both a sociologist and historian of idea. There's an interesting quote here by Over the Green, the author of the book. And you can see also the man here, the picture. So the prospect of eventually being able to combat aging as well as we can currently combat most infectious diseases strikes terror into most people. I don't know if it's true that the majority are against of this idea or it's just a minority. We should have to make a survey to understand it. But it's true, I can tell you that I'm discussing this issue since 20 years, in the last 20 years, and I can observe a polarized response. There are people that are kind of enthusiastic hearing this, about this research, and other people that are very negative, and they think it's a very bad idea, again, from political, ethical, or other reasons. And that's exactly the sociological issue. Why do we have this polarized response? Why don't we have like consensus, so a collective conscious that accept this advancement of science as positive? Why do we have like this dissonance or cultural dissonance or social dissonance? So that's the question. I can tell you that the responses are, the criticism to this idea are always the same. So we hear many times this criticism, and the responses are always the same. So basically, there are patterns of defending or attacking this idea. So, for instance, we hear many times that this is the mad scientist playing God. So people raise the specter of scientists like creating dangers for others on the based on kind of strange ideas. So someone woke up in the morning and said, why don't we defeat aging and we defeat death? And of course, we may have also different answers here. We hear the answers of the atheists. They say, well, if man doesn't play God, who else can do that? But we have answers from believers. They say, Deus vult, God want, God will this. So as well as you assume to know the will of God, saying that he doesn't like this, we may assume that God agrees with this, and we will see it during the history of ideas. This come out as a concept, has a long history. We will see. Second, like typical criticism to this idea is that if we end aging, we get bored. If life starts lasting centuries or maybe 1,000 years, we get bored. And again, we always have the same answers to the question. Well, if you are bored about life, why don't you stop eating? Because if you eat and go work, it means you're trying to fight to keep it longer. So, or other answers of this type. But I think we can get it like a little bit more from a more sophisticated. I'm certainly not saying that these objections are dumb, not at all. No, what shocks me is the way they are raised. People who are totally irrational and open to discuss and on any other matter approach the topic of defeating aging with a resistance to debate that virtually defies description. Because the problem is this: if we raise all these problems individually, they make sense. They make a lot of sense. It's worth discussing them. But sometimes the same person propose all of these problems together, and they don't really match together. Think about it. If someone says, this is only an idea of a madman, it's not feasible, it's impossible, and then he said that this is dangerous for humanity. But if it's impossible, it will never be a danger because they will never make it. So it's just a waste of time. People may waste time like playing golf, and other people may waste their time making research that will not lead to any result. But again, another problem, like I don't want it, only where people want it. Most people that are saying would never do that. There is a problem of overpopulation. But if there would be a problem of overpopulation, it means that most people want it. So the weird person that is against is you. You are weird because you don't want it. So I don't know if you're following me. The two things don't work together. Or, for instance, I don't want it. It would be boring. You cannot force me. Of course, the answer here is like, I will never buy the medicines for you, so don't worry about this because it will cost money. I will not buy the pills or the injection. But the thing is, like, you cannot then complain because the rich have it. You said you didn't want it, so why do you care about this if a group of weird people want to be eternal? So the problem here, sociologically, is this. This is clearly an emotional response, not totally rational. People now, they tell me, again, I always reject the faith today simply because they do not find the prospect of eternal life attractive. To live always without end, these old things considered can only be monotonous and ultimately unbearable. That's what the Pope said. Of course, he would like people loving the idea of eternal lives, and he's asking himself why they don't want it now. They don't come to the church, and they answer to my question this way: I don't want to live forever. So the same problem is faced both in the field of religion and in the field of science. And scientists were really shocked because when they presented their research in the field of anti-aging therapies, they thought that would be treated like heroes. And in fact, they were shocked seeing that there was this response. So again, the question now is our society affected by a spiritual disease that makes our inherited physical disease, I mean, aging, acceptable? And then, which is the disease affecting our society? Is it nihilism, on which Friedrich Nietzsche wrote? Is it alienation? And this is the topic like of Karl Marx. He said, now we are like tools in a machine And it's hard to think I'm gonna work in a factory doing a routinary job for 1,000 years, every day the same thing, and without even being like mastering the product of my work. Or is it social neurosis? You know that Freud was elaborating on this topic about the fact that our ego has to suppress the id, suppress our biological instincts to adjust to reality, to the superego, to society, and this created neurosis. This, as you can see, so we take this perspective and we go back. The first one, which was written about 4,000 years ago, probably, or the gods and humans were living together, and friend Enkidu dies, and he's shocked by this death because he thought to this philosophical question of why death, why are we dying, decided to exterminate humanity. So Gilgamesh asked Utanapishni how, the interesting thing is that here that he is immortal, but unfortunately when he met this, and if you cannot be awake, it means you cannot defeat death. The wild animals the Lord God has made. He said to the woman, I mean to Eve, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the day. We are our society, our history was informed by the translation of the Bible. So it doesn't really matter how it was originally written, yes, because we are taking this perspective, become conscious. As you know, there are many different interpretations, and we are rather talking about this unlimited lifespan or indefinite lifespan. Then Noah, which is like Utanapishni, basically, or a similar character, is up to you, was 500 years old when he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then, of course, we have the record man, is Methuselah, that lived together, altogether, 969 years. And Obed agreed, he said, you will live 1,000 years, because he was thinking about this biblical character. And we know it because he named his foundation after the name of Methuselah. It's called Methuselah Foundation. So you can see that this history had is still having an impact on our culture and society. But we find similar stories in the Greek culture, ancient Greek culture. For instance, we got this idea of the Golden Age. If we read Hesiod, Works and Day, we find both the myth of Prometheus and Pandora. Prometheus is the creator of humans, it's not Zeus. So here we have a difference. Yes, Zeus is not the creator of humans, it's Prometheus. Pandora is the first woman, so the equivalent, you can say, of Eve, but she was created not by Prometheus, but by Hephaestus. So, and then we find the myth of the Golden Age. So at the beginning, humans were created similar to gods. Again, we have a similar story at least. And here we got a quote from Hesiod. So they lived in the golden race at the time of Kronos, when he was king in the sky, so not yet Zeus. Just like gods, they spend their life with a spirit free from care, entirely apart from toil and distress. Worthless old age did not oppress them, so they were eternally young. But they were always the same in their feet and hands, and delighted in festivities, lacking in all evils. And they died as if overpowered by sleep. So they didn't have also a very bad death, like they would die where they were sleeping. Then, of course, I'm not telling you all the story. You can read Plato about the Megiste Metabole, that there was a catastrophe, so the gods left Earth and things like that. In the Middle Age, of course, the two main sources of knowledge are the Bible and the Gospel and Aristotle. But still, we don't have to forget that there is alchemy coming from the Chinese and from the Arabs. And here, especially, we find an interesting character, and this character is Roger Bacon, who provides an interesting interpretation of the Bible. Because all those people react and say, we shouldn't play God. He got this interpretation that we should never rebel to God or to Zeus or to Enlil and so on, because otherwise we get punished. In this interpretation, the interpretation is different, because I read the quote by Roger Bacon. He said, the possibility of prolongation of life is confirmed by this, that man is naturally immortal, that is able not to die. And even after he had sinned, he could live near 1,000 years. Afterward, by little and little, the length of his life was abbreviated. So he said, God, it took and can be reduced the life of to the life of Adam or Theseus, because the prevailed corruption, but we may prolong scientific revolution. During the scientific revolution, I could choose many examples talking about this. You must know one thing, yes, that Roger Bacon, as well as many other thinkers of that time, were convinced to come when that will be due only to extraordinary accidents or to the decay of the vital forces, and that ultimately the genital power until death, and no one does one's stomachs, and will never know the tragedy of old age and impotence. You know, the Marinetti was quite interested in seducing women. He wrote books that nowadays would be politically incorrect. Still, yes, then we probably found at least partially the solution to this problem with Viagra, but this is in the wake of these ideas, yes. So by means of the intuition, we shall overcome the seeming irreducible divide that separates our human flesh from the metal of motors. It says, so the idea of the cyborg, half machine, half man. And then after the reign of the animal, behold the beginning of the reign of the machine. We are preparing the creation of the mechanical man with interchangeable parts. Again, the cyborg, the idea of the cyborg. And we will liberate, this is from the Technical Manifesto of Futurist Literature, so 1912, we will liberate man from the idea of death, and hence from death itself, the supreme definition. We don't have to understand exactly how the machine works to design therapies to solve the problems. All you have to understand is aging damage itself, the molecular and cellular lesions that impair the structure and function of the body's tissues. So we should focus on the effect of aging and try to solve it without really, we don't need to know all the other information. That's what most gerontologists are focusing on, yes? So, and his solution, one of his solutions, he proposed several ones, but he said, for instance, stem cells. We can rejuvenate, regenerate our tissues by using stem cells. Of course, there were many bioethical problems related to the use of embryonic stem cells, and he was also involved in these polemics of a degree. By the way, this was just to illustrate his approach, but this is just one of the many approaches that we can find around. This is another important information in the history of this idea, in my opinion. This was an historical date because it was this man, Ray Kurzweil, as you probably know, is the guru of transhumanism. He's a famous inventor. If you're a musician, you know him for his synthesizers and his piano. By the way, in 2012, tech giant Google announces that famous inventor, entrepreneur, author, and future Ray Kurzweil has been hired as director of engineering. So he got this important position. 1 year later, Kurzweil stated, we have less publication, and this is much more selective, by the way, but still we have kind of like 600, 700 publication, and the growth seems to be like exponential in this field. And this does not depend on the growth of like publications globally, because we have like about 4 million publications every year. But you can see that the curve is completely different. So it's not just like a consequence of this. Now, these are good reasons for those among us that are kind of enthusiastic or at least positively interested in this field. It gives hope, basically, that maybe in the future we will have the solution to this challenge and this problem, being aging. On the other hand, I also have a word for those that probably don't like this idea, because as we said, the response is polarized. So among you can have also people that don't really like this idea of like changing. That was my presentation, and I'm open to discuss with you eventually even other aspects that I didn't touch during my presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Campa. Now we will have Professor Barbara Henry's response. I will allow her to share her screen now. And while I introduce her, Professor Barbara Henry is a full professor of political philosophy at Scuola Superiore Santa Ana di Pisa. She has authored books on authors such as Cassirer, Arendt, Heidegger, and Junger. She has also translated Edward Gann's works on Hegel. And among her books on the topic, it is important to mention Mito e Identità, Contesti di Tolleranza, La via identitaria al multiculturalismo, Charles Taylor e oltre, and Dal golem ai cyborgs, Transmigrazioni nell'immaginario. She has also published a large number of articles and book chapters, many of them of international relevance. And her work pays special attention to the robotic and cybernetic imaginary, contributing to the current debates on post-humanism. And you can find her full CV and list of publications at her portal on the Santa Ana website. So now I'll give the floor to Professor Barbara Henry, who will comment on some of Professor Campa's points. Thank you, Professor Henry.
Thank you very much to both of arguments. The first is prepared by kind of positioning of declaration of intent, where I'm posing myself in giving you reasons, in giving some doubts about unlimited life, and the rest of the arguments will be, for the very beginning, about the feasibility of unlimited life, and the second part will be more on the desirability of unlimited life. And of course, you will hear again a lot of topics and type of elements that Ricardo Campa have already bring to your attention. So I will try to rephrase or to put in another type of frame some of his argument as well. First of all, I would stress on the point that there is not only transhumanism which is interested in unlimited life. And first of all, we could say that at first glance, there could be a significant overlap of the two positions, transhumanist and posthumanist, as they both assume the goal of technical improvement and advancement and enhancement to reach longevity. I would like to stress this point. I prefer in my vocabulary to speak about longevity more than a limited life, because longevity implies how to prolong a good life as long as possible and to maximize the extent and the quality of a healthy, worthy life for so many individuals as possible. So we can see that there is some kind of convergence from the side of the two movements, for the side of the two visions, but nevertheless, there is a very big difference, because transhumanism remains anthropocentric, while posthumanism is radically non-anthropocentric. That means non-against and without the human, but in a new type of a position of mankind, which is more responsible and eccentric towards the rest of species, data, elements, natural components, and so on and so on. And then this point of difference, it makes a difference even in the way in which posthumanists can approach the prosthetic and any type of enhancement towards a better and longer life. If a posthumanism is non-anthropocentric, means is interspeciesist, hybrid, metamorphosis, anti-dualistic, and referred to other forms of knowledge, not only to science. And that implies a kind of a wide range preventive screening in terms of which kind of enhancement, in terms of hybridization with machine, are sustainable, healthy, positive, in a relational vision of the assessment of which kind of enhancement we should and ought carry out. Then post-humanism should become political, a political reasoning that must transform the risk of transformative technologies into interspeciesist opportunities, considering the problems raised by what Ricardo have quoted, climate change, a critical approach to the, in both sides, nevertheless, I see the problem of identity as it is, from the side of a individualistic approach, the permanence of this particular identity, or from the side of how to maintain the transformation of matter and of life against the inevitable law of entropy, so far as we are considering the worldly dimension. Life could be technically extended, even individual, organic, and material limits in the horizon of an idea of unlimitedness. It is very interesting that the point of Ricardo Campa is not to see immortality, but to see a very long, prolonged life can be compatible with the very typical Western vision of sameness. And I think that Ricardo is very, very confident with the Western paradigm in which this idea of sameness that Paul Ricord, that we have quoted, have criticized, remain a central concept. So the third point is for me, which kind of science? Because the problem is, if he is credible and position in the vision of transhumanists, which kind of science is the science who supports the idea of limited life? In other words, which naturalist account, which put in the center the problem that the possibility to come to truth is still real, but to a truth with brackets. The crucial point resides in the knowledge is possible out of the knowing possibility of the cycle entwined with. And then my question is, should be necessary, in my opinion, to open a very broad reflection about which kind of epistemological stance is behind the transhumanist vision of science. And I think that in this case, we could see much more the divergence, much more differentiation between post-humanist approach and dead life, instead of a long life for the most people that we know, but with no qualitative relevance, and so on and so on. And we should open a debate about these problems, which kind of vulnerabilities we are able or we are ready to accept for the sake of the elimination of the vulnerabilities that we really want to eliminate as more discriminating, horrible, and so on and so on. And then let's come to the desirability parts of my contribution. If all we have that is technically and materially feasible, is still desirable. And then I think that we need to open a point for liberal and democratic approach we are embedded in. I would take for granted that everybody has the right to conceive happiness and whatever way he, she, it was to see. And personally, but this is not only a problem of idiosyncratic vision, I think that everybody should be convinced only if the features that he, she, it consider relevant about the idea of limited life can be ensured. For example, embodiment, no unlimited life without the symbolic materiality of the self. No endurance of life without the, if you want, resurrection of my body. Not simply the change of the external involucrals of what I am, but the possibility to maintain what the myths of the resurrection of the body, of the flesh, is bringing in itself. Another point taking seriously the question of meaning. And the question of meaning, what makes sense, what is worthy, will be the core of my next 2 or 3 arguments. What is meaningful, what makes sense for my life, and so on. Then the openness to the unpredictability that can be considered from the mystical point of view, from the agnostic point of view, from a very pantheistic or whatsoever point of view. No, I speak about radical openness and predictability, kairos whatsoever. But the idea of the openness to the vertigo of what is not under our control, for example. And then what is very, very relevant, the interracial relationships. How can we foster and give a fresh body to intergenerational relationships that underlie memory, culture, and all human forms of interaction so far? The problem is, so far we are considered, we are a human or a species which is strictly related to these connections. Of course, transhumanists can say we are going towards a totally unprecedented change, and what we are now will not be in the future. But nevertheless, we have the right to give arguments to what we could consider as relevant even in a future in which the human is something beyond what it is now. And for example, the example of San Junipero. San Junipero is one of the most interesting episodes of Black Mirror, in which this problem, relationships, friendships, love, become one of the experimental crucials for the desiderability and even for the features that we should introduce to make an eternal, in this case, unlimited, because it's not eternal, is for make an unlimited type of life worthy of. And then the idea, this is the problem of meaning and value, is my own opinion, a pragmatic point of view, in the sense of Kant, in the sense of the philosophical anthropology of Kant. What is relevant for a self-reflective being in search of what ensure and make interesting, valuable their own way of living. This is the point. And then, if unlimited life is possible, even under the above desiderable conditions, in any case, our relation to the world and to others, in a very broad sense, even non-human or non-organic type of beings, would lose meaning and value if you do not insert, if you do not think, if you don't imagine a number of readjustments in order to eliminate what is really not only now, not only in the past, but even in the future, reasonable and interesting and worthy for us. And the problem of this idea that an open question, I'm not sure that I agree with this idea, but the problem of that some people in the West, and not only, consider that because of something which is not made with effort, is not worthy. Might a lack of effort undermine the evaluation of this performance in the sense of the unlimited life, or is this only a problem of the past? But are we sure that the past have only bad features, or we don't think that even what you have exposed in a wonderful way, the role of mythical experience, the role of mythical intercultural approach to this contemporary problem is not in this resource, in this thesaurus, one of the way to approach and to assess, to evaluate much better the question of a limited life. And then I come again to these very provocative questions. We have quoted cosmism, we have quoted the eschatological origin of transhumanism, and you know very well, we have written wonderful pages, Ricardo, on this idea of the upwing spiral, the idea of the eschatological background in a very worldly sense. For example, from Toyota de Chardin and so on, and from even the more indirect precursor of transhumanists, this is the Russian cosmos. Are we sure that we are we must pursue it by purely technological means, that's to say surgery, prosthetic, medicine, pharmacological helps, and any kind of enhancement, or if we are compelled from the internal logic of the transhumanistic idea to go back to the transhumanist eschatological sources. And in this case, would technology play a subordinated role in this case or not? And then is the provocation, of course, for you, and I'm very interested to hear your response, your reactions, and of course, the response of the reaction of the people who have joined us. Thank you very much for your interesting and provocative seminar and conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Barbara Henry. We can now give the floor to Professor Campa if he wants to respond to some of Professor Henry's provocations and comments. While first, and then after that, I'll read some of the questions from the audience that we already have some questions for both Professor Campa and Professor Henry. So first, to Professor Campa. Your microphone is off.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, very well.
Okay. So there were hundreds of questions in the presentation of Professor Henry, and I don't really know from which I should start, but I can say something like this. Of course, many of the problems, the issues, they were like on which Professor Henry were speaking, they're really fundamental. They must be discussed. I have this tendency that I see generally the evolution of the situation from a sociological point of view. Even if I have a background in philosophy, then I turned into a sociologist. It's 20 years I'm working as a sociologist. So before asking me if something is good or bad, I tend to ask now if something is happening or not. And if something is happening, if this can be stopped or not, because if something is happening, it cannot be stopped. It doesn't even make sense to ask if we like it or not. So let me clarify this point. I see that the world is going in a direction. There are millions of laboratories, of factories, of people involved in research that will somehow interact with each other. I don't really think that this is stoppable in any possible way. And now, the consequences, second point, I tend to be pragmatic on this point. It says, first of all, I think we should try to solve the problems that are real and that we see, and then eventually the problems that may arise possibly in the future, because we have certainty of these problems and we don't have certainty of other problems coming. So for instance, we are certain that we are dying. We are getting old and we are dying. And on this field, many people are working to solve the problem. This technology will be on the market. We don't know if this will be an assisted market by governments or just a private market. We don't know it yet, but on the way, there will be people that will buy this. And I think they will never listen if other people like the idea or not. Just because we have 200 countries around. If one country wants to ban this technology, as for instance, Italy banned genetically organized food, but we're still eating this in Italy because we import it from Spain and we have it anyway, this product in our market. So the thing is that we may even get like people discussing these philosophers, and we may even agree that we don't like this, we want to stop it. In my opinion, this would just remain an information for future generations that some people didn't like it. But the problem that there are also 200 countries and so many different cultures is important for another point of view, because when we talk about the meaning, we have this tendency thinking like the meaning, but from our Western point of view, or from our individual point of view, from the point of view of our political party, of our religion. But there are many religions, many political ideas, many cultures. And I want to be very clear, giving an example. Unlimited life has a completely different meaning for Christian, for instance, that accept the point of view of Teilhard de Chardin. From a Christian that does not accept this point of view, is more conservative, but it has a completely different meaning for an atheist. It has a completely different meaning for a Buddhist. A Buddhist would tell you, yes, unlimited life would provoke boredom. I would get bored, but that's exactly what I want. I want to get bored with life because my goal is escaping from the cycle of reincarnations. So I want to escape from samsara to enter in nirvana. So these technologies will help me. But then you may say, but I don't believe that there is reincarnation. But that's your personal belief. As well, an atheist does not believe that there is life after death, or a Christian believes that there is, but at certain conditions, and another Christian believes that there are at other conditions. So the point is this: we will never find a philosophical solution to this problem, because there are different worldviews, different religions, different metaphysical assumptions, different metaphysical ontological assumptions, and if we accept the idea of human rights, we should accept all these points of view as far as people are not violent. So I'm not denying here that that could be a problem that is a problem for everybody, because we live in the same world. Yes. So on the one hand, we must cope with this diversity and with the fact that there will be different meanings that people give to unlimited life or to the refusal of unlimited life. People will decide. So we have to deal with this. We have to cope with this. We cannot force people to take the pill or stop it or arresting people that will take the pill once this will be available on the market in one country or another. So we must deal with this. On the other hand, it's true that we have some problems that are common to all countries or cultures. So for instance, global warming. Yes. Let's now take for granted that this is happening. And I think something is happening in this direction. And anyway, pollution is a reality. In this case, of course, we must manage to find a common solution between different countries. But don't you think, for instance, that if like these technologies will be on the market, let's say let's be optimistic, in 10 years. I'm not sure about this. Maybe I will never have it in my life. Yes. So, but let's say that we have it in 10 years. And let's say that the market is free, and let's say that they're kind of cheap, and so that many people can afford buying this all around the country. They will buy it in China, they will buy it in the United States, in Europe, wherever. Don't you think if people have a perspective that they can live like 500 years or 600 years or maybe 1,000 years, they would care more about the environment. Now there are people destroying everything because they think my life has no meaning. I'll be here for 1 or 2 decades or whatever. I do what I can and then I disappear, nihilism. But if people would extend their life so much, probably they would care more about. This is just an answer to one of the many interesting questions that were posed by Professor Henry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, but I think that I must wait and for the answers. Thank you very much for your very innovative response to how to cope with the mortality and the announcement of responsibility. Huh? Interesting.
I'm gonna read now some of the questions from the audience. First, we have a question from Sakari Makini. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly. He says that as a scientist, an engineer, and a humanist, he supports the use of technology for improving human health funds, but also he sees that the present cultural tendency towards solutionism or technical solutionism is driving a destructive and ecologically and unsustainable practice. So in view of this, he's asking Professor Campa, what principles would you articulate to extend the notion of transhumanism to include not simply individual human lifespan, but also the collective longevity and vitality of our species and healthy ecology on this planet. I think what you were just saying about global warming sort of touches on that, but I don't know if you want to complement.
Well, the thing is this. If I can say that somehow I also noticed a limit in some of the members of transhumanist movement at the very beginning. I'm talking about like 20 years ago when I started following these ideas and joining the discussion. They were much focusing on individuals, not much on communities. And focusing on communities is somehow one of my I would call obsession, as inverted commas says, but this comes from my work of a sociologist. So the thing, the first question I was asking is like, if these technologies are on the market, but only a part of us can access it, yes. But think about how there are people that cannot afford to pay a dentist, and so they go without teeth. So there are problems that biomedical technologies sometimes are very expensive. So we would just start like splitting in different species, because there would be a species would be enhanced and another would be not, but all of these species would be sentient. So I thought, shouldn't we think about like evolving all together? I mean, that was the ideal of Julian Huxley, the idea of Teilhard de Chardin, or the first transhumanists. They said we should evolve all together. On the other hand, we cannot force people. Probably a solution that I see is that we give access to people. It says we involve also the public sector, let's say, let's put it this way. As well as we may have a vaccine that is no profit and a vaccine that is profit, we may also have like kind of no profit technology. Degree thinks that we can manage to have this technology almost for free, because governments will understand that this is good for their budget, because all these illnesses related to aging are very expensive for the public system. So the public system will probably benefit by giving these new technologies directly to offering these technologies to the people that want to use it. On the way, we would have the split anyway, but this would be a choice. Concerning global warming, I think, yes, I was answering this. In my opinion, if we give this possibility to most people to access, I think at the end, most people will access, even those that now are refusing the idea. This happened with all technologies in the past. When the telephone appeared, I'm not saying that this is only positive things. Yes, we know that we became slave of this. But the thing is that when this appeared at the first moment, many people say, I will never use it. And now everybody has this. Then this applies to many other technologies. Very often, we have this situation that people refuse things because they think they cannot have it. You know, in Italian, we say la volpe e l'uva. Yes, so the fox said, I cannot reach the grapefruit, so it means that they are not good. Once they have the possibility to get it, then they become good. This will happen also in this field, in technology. When this will be available, will be cheap, everybody will want it. I'm not saying that there will not be any unwanted side effect. I'm saying that people will go for these technologies. In my opinion, this would have a positive effect on problem of pollution and so on, because it will make people more responsible. Because if you note, sorry, I know I'm taking too much time, but it's very brief. I noticed, I can tell you a very short story. They created an artificial lake, yes? At a point, children gathered there and started throwing stones in the lake. It's a kind of an instinct. Without thinking that everybody do this artificial lake will disappear very soon. Older people were not doing this because they are more mature. They think in these terms. If we live longer, if we think that we'll be here, for instance, in the next century, we will be more careful in destroying this planet. This is my main argument, my main hope. Yes, I'm not a prophet, so I may be wrong, but this is my hope.
Thank you, Professor. We have lots of questions. We still have half an hour, but the questions keep coming. So we'll see how long we can keep this. I mean, how many of these questions we can actually cover. There are two questions for Professor Henry. One is by David Wood. I mean, both are by David Wood. The first one is, he asked if there are some examples in natural species with negligible senescence that would, according to him, answer to the question of entropy. That, for example, some trees can be more than 4,000 years old, but show no additional senescence than younger trees. And there are also examples of whales and albatross birds that do this as well, if that would answer the question of entropy. And the second one is also from David Wood to Professor Henry, is do you acknowledge that transhumanists, such as Max Moore, Nick Bostrom, David Pearce, emphasize the adoption not only of the possibilities of science, but also of life-promoting principles and values?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say, I would try to cover the first question by focusing on the point that I was speaking about identity, not about the possibility of a species to survive. It's not a problem how to maintain the life of a species on the planet, but I spoke about identity in the personal vision, that's to say personhood, then coherence, stability, endurance, and possibility to be self-reflexive, the same at the very beginning, and even in the sense of group identity or sovereign individual identity. Because of course, in terms of some species, you can see that some species are still surviving on the planet, but they are not able to be compared with the meaning or the sense of identity I try to sketch. And nevertheless, there are other situations in which materiality tends to lose their consistency, independently from in which species this materiality is posed. It's not a problem to maintain an equilibrium between different phases of the changing of material, but the problem is how to focus this materiality in a particular, could I say, permanent identitarian nucleus or whatsoever. This is why I say this is not the point of my argument. And to make a joke, I could answer by critically by quoting Kurt Vonnegut, in which he paradoxically show that the possibility of the prolonging of the human species on the planet is only in the sense of transforming these species is in a totally pre-reflexive, pre-rational, pre-symbolic species. And I think that is, in some sense, the answers to your question, I hope. Second question, I'm sorry, I cannot agree with you, because even if in some very, very limited notes or reflections, you can find this type of the role of life promoting principles and values, I still see that the fundamental paradigm is the scientific, I could say Western scientific paradigm, even before the post-structuralist change of paradigm of the 70 of the past year. So I think that this, what you are trying to let me see, I cannot see this point. I see, of course, this idea, life prolonging principle and values, in the precursor, the eschatological precursor of transhumanism, as Ricardo Campa know very well, but not in the authors that you are quoting. Especially Nick Bostrom is a real representative of the idea of, if you want, progressive and aggressive vision of science in terms of an hyper enlightenment, able to rape and to destroy the resources not only of the earth, but even of the planets in the universe. So I am very dubious that I can find such kind of point of reference in the authors that you quoted. But of course, we could compare tests and so on, but it's not the place to do it. Perhaps in the next seminar, I don't know. Thank you very much for the very triggering questions.
Thank you, Professor Barbara Henry. Now we have a question for Professor Campa by Paul Graham. So he's saying your connection of the current transhumanist movement with Italian futurism is very on point and rather telling. When we consider the very clear connection of Italian futurism to fascism and the enduring connection of transhumanism to eugenics, he says, your history of ideas approach does certainly reveal the connection of transhumanist ideas to very long discourses of chosen people, hyper-rationality, and a mythology of a fall from some assumed Fargo golden age. So he says, I have many questions, but I suppose the one I most want answered would be, how do you respond to the suggestion that transhumanism is the latest label for an age-old dream of the privileged? A speculative and lucrative answer to the question, what can you sell to the man who already has literally everything?
No, I think that this is more than a question, is a statement, but probably a statement of someone that is not an insider. So he doesn't know the transhumanist movement. So he just had a picture of outside, picking some elements and then extending this on everybody. But if you have more contact, and as an insider, I can tell you, there are so many different ideas inside transhumanism, because inside transhumanism, yes, but I don't know which, yeah, it says you belong, but I don't know in your environment. But I can tell you, for instance, that in the Italian environment, there are transhumanists of any type. There are communist transhumanists, socialist transhumanists, right-wing transhumanists, true, anarcho-capitalist transhumanists, there was anything. Believers, non-believers, Buddhists, Christians, whatever. And so all of these people had a different idea, to the point that, in my opinion, can be reduced transhumanism only to one single idea, which is self-directed evolution and human enhancement. That's the only thing. For instance, my orientation, probably you know if you read my other works not related, is a leftist orientation. So I always think in terms of community, not of the privilege. I'm for involving the public sector in producing these technologies and offering this technology. I'm against the idea of imposing, of course, these technologies, but but this is my personal point of view. The fact that I connect to Italian futurism is just because, you know, I'm not that type of person that sees things black and white. He makes two boxes, and then on the box everything they don't like, and the other box everything they like. I may not like many ideas of the Italian futurists, but I think that they had this idea of self-directed evolution. They have it, so I have to recognize it. As this idea was present also in some Christian thinkers like Descartes or Alexis Carrel, sorry, or Teilhard de Chardin. So Teilhard de Chardin was also thinking in terms, yes, eugenics. Eugenics, of course, has an history. It was born in England, this idea. Yes, it was a British idea. It was not like the beginning related to Nazism or whatever. It was somehow imported by other cultures, but this idea was widespread. So Alexis Carrel was a Catholic thinker, and it was for eugenics. Actually, he said that that was his proposal. I totally disagree with this idea, but these Catholic thinkers suggested we should build gas chamber and eliminate criminals and disabled people. And this is something we proposed before the Second World War, yes? So eugenics was also discussed by other thinkers, even by Teilhard de Chardin, but in a totally different fashion, because they were thinking eugenics in a positive thing, so like using technologies to improve people having problems, and not like giving them the possibility to improve. Yes. So these are just, in my opinion, very schematic way. You put this and that is right wing, left wing. I don't know. Again, Italian futurists. Are they fascist? I wrote a few essays about this. At the very beginning, they were like welcoming the revolution in Russia, so in USSR. So are they fascist? Not actually a typical fascist, but what does it mean to be fascist? Because they were fascists, they were monarchist, Catholic, and actually coming from the Liberal Party. and other were coming from the Socialist Party. So there were many different ideas inside fascism again. It's very important, you know, to understand the complexity of all these movements, of transhumanism, of Catholicism. There are many religions inside Catholicism. There are many religions inside, many political ideas inside fascism, many political ideas inside also democracy. So I don't know if I answered your question. As I understand, you don't really like the idea, but we are free. You can stay far from these ideas. This will not like affect. I don't like the idea of a privileged class. Actually, I'm fighting for a no-class society, but this is my personal view. I'm telling you, by the way, that I'm just concerning futurism. I think I don't know if I'm the only one that makes this connection just because I'm Italian and I read those works. Because probably if you ask Bostrom, if you tell you no connection with Italian futurism. If you ask someone else. So you will find different opinions inside the transhumanist movement. There are many, many different ideas. I quite like the idea of Teilhard de Chardin, for instance. Yes, his understanding of evolution, which gives like a mystical idea and is connected with the idea of a collective evolution of whole humanity together.
Thanks. Now we have a question from Ilaria Santoema, which I think it can be addressed to both Professor Campa and Professor Henry. Ilaria says, a recurring question raised to the Gray relates to the risks that a longer lifespan might put before us with regard to the ecological issue and the climate emergency, something that was already discussed. On this path, I would like to ask how a failure to conceptualize limits, not only from a socio-political point of view, but also above all from an epistemological standpoint, might fail also with respect to ecosophical problems emerging today. In particular, in the context of critical post-humanists and Anthropocene studies, Ilaria says, such problematic is indeed accounted extensively thanks to the onto-epistemological perspective that dismantled the immaterial identity of human being. On the contrary, it seems to me that current transhumanism paradigms still assume an epistemological model that frames subjectivity within a futuristic rationality. So the question is, don't you think, or don't you both think, that the longevity proposal by Aubrey de Grey and his project means such an epistemological consideration of the human without taking into account the multiplicity of entanglements that permeate human being in relation to non-human entities?
Should I answer first or Professor Henry? Because in my opinion, this is a question that should be asked to Aubrey de Grey, because of course, he's focusing on a problem. You know, in our societies, hyper-specialized societies, if each of us is a specialist of something, he is a specialist in gerontology. He focuses on a problem, he wants to solve this problem. Maybe it's true he doesn't see related problems, as I don't see all the possible problems. I have my own perspective, sociological, historical, and I may not see many aspects. So maybe it's not that he doesn't focus on these parallel problems because he thinks they are irrelevant, but this comes out from the way our society is organized today, in which each of us focuses on a problem. I'm the first saying that we should have an holistic approach, and that's why people from different fields, they should somehow meet and discuss, because that's the way that all the different points of view are emerging. So I don't know if I understand completely your question, but as I understand, because you're raising the problem of epistemology, I don't know if you're raising the problem on how much we can like rely on the approach from the methodology of science that is adopted when we are studying you know, this problem, or if you rather think in a more holistic terms, in the sense that you're asking, okay, he's trying to focus this problem to save humanity from aging, and then what about the other animals, the environment, and so on? If the question is the second, then I think I already answered by saying that, in my opinion, this would have a positive effect. But we should ask him, yes, if he has a response to this idea. If we're talking about the problem of methodology, so that probably, yes, we are doing research in a way, yes. This relates also to what Professor Henry said, yes, how science is understood by transhumanists. And I can tell you that, yes, probably it's true that the majority of scientists, especially those coming from the natural sciences and from computer science and engineering, they have this view that's kind of related to realism. In the sense they think that science is discovering something real, that atoms are real and all the rest, and so that we can find truth. I think, of course, I didn't make any survey, so I don't know exactly, but I know also that there are many transhumanists that are rather oriented, have a rather pragmatic orientation, so that probably we're just discovering like a provisional truth. By the way, this provisional truth, which is not an ultimate truth, it gives us the possibility to change something in reality, to have some applications. We are happy with these applications. So we have to be flexible. Of course, the truth may change. We could have another scientific revolution, talking about now, thinking about Thomas Kuhn and so on. So this kind of approach that you find more in the history of science or sociology of science. So there are transhumanists open to this view. Probably they are a minority, I can admit this, but there are. For instance, that's my case. Yes, I don't think that I'm a fallibilist, so I think the science can fail. So there could be mistakes, but what else can we do? I mean, we have this approach. It's important that we know about this. Yes, that we don't treat science as religious dogmas. But this is my personal opinion. Probably you find another transhumanist that will tell you, no, science is this is the right methodology, there is no discussion and things like that. But I think in any movement you can find different positions, as well as we have different theological positions inside Catholicism, as I said.
Thanks.
Should I answer briefly? Okay. So as Ilaria Santoema know, and perhaps other people knows, the guy is not one of my authors, and I can only say that according to a post-human approach, the problem of identity, as I try to phrase in the discourse of transhumanism, is not able to cope with interspeciesism, ecological, ontology, and so on and so on. But what I tried to speak in terms of identity was related to the internal problems of the transhumanist discourse from the side of anarcho-capitalistic or the anarcho-radical individualism till to the more communitarian-oriented transhumanists. This is why I used this internal contradiction in terms of identity for their own discourse. Of course, as by adhering to posthumanism, I agree with you, but not because I can blame the Gray, because I am not good enough in knowing his texts and his works, because again, he is not one of my favorite authors. This is, I don't know if I answer it by making these distinctions and by clarifying even again my argument about identity, the identity issue. I don't know if it's much clearer in this sense than before. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Henry. We have 10 minutes. I'm gonna read briefly two questions that were asked by Fiorella Battaglia first, and then Elisa Piras. First, Fiorella asks, very briefly, I'm not going to read the whole question, but she's interested about this relationship between this rationalist approach to unlimited life, and she also is concerned about the question of justice. So she says, we need at once, is this a question, do we need at once that our epistemic conduct should also become more rational, but also more just when we're thinking about unlimited life, or is just a rational question? And I'm going to make quickly also the question by Elisa Piras. She's asking if this is potentially unlimited lifespan would foster more cooperative attitudes, or would it make people more prone to self-assertion? What would be like the anthropological consequences of this?
Yes. Should I start with this? Okay, problem of justice. Justice is a very important concept here. Thanks for posing the question. Again, my problem, taking the problem from the issue from a sociological point of view, is this: of which justice are we talking about? Because, you know, we may talk about like social justice or other types, yes, of justice. So we're talking about social justice. Probably you have different ideas about this, because if you ask let's use this old terminology, but the owners of the means of production, the capitalists, they will tell you that it's just that they accumulate more and more money because this is an outcome of my capabilities. If you ask the workers, they will tell you it's unjust that they take all this money. If you ask Marx how money the capitalists should take, they will say nothing, because all should be in the hand of the workers, and so on and so forth. So justice should be kind of like, put it this way, for me is a word that, yes, it has a meaning, but I don't know if I understand it as you understand it. So basically you should elaborate more and tell me what you have in mind, what type of problem you're focusing on. Then I could give you an answer, because if you are talking about, like, again, social justice, that would be my personal answer. So not the answer of a transhumanist, yes, not the answer of a transhumanist. Transhumanists may have different answers on this point. As I said, there are many different political views. In my opinion, it would be unjust, for instance, that these technologies, when available, are only for the rich, just because we develop a system in a way that that just like comes out of like 30 years of privatization where the public sector has no role and so on. But this is my personal answer. So I don't know if we are talking about social justice or we're talking about another type of justice, civic or whatever. If you could like specify. There are many types of discriminations. Yes, there are discriminations that come from classes, discriminations that come to there are minorities that are discriminated, women are discriminated. There are many types of discrimination. So I don't know which one you are focusing on.
Social justice, she clarifies.
Yeah, social justice. So I told you, my position is this, which is very close to the position of Aubrey de Grey, that these technologies, when available, they shouldn't be on the market just as any other commodities, but they should be treated as government, as a chance to give all citizens this opportunity with no obligation, of course, no obligation. And this may give us a chance to evolve everybody together. The second question is, I understand also the second problem. What if human enhancement, of course, if people are always like young and strong and like full of life and so on, but even we may have other enhancers in the future, much more powerful. Aren't we afraid that since humans are predators, that we start killing each other, having even more violence than today? Yeah, this is a serious problem, because we always talk about human beings as they were angels, that we were angels, but actually we are a predator. We every day we wake up in the morning, we kill billions of animals and we eat them. And don't think that this is the attitude because, you know, of the transhumanists. This is the attitude of everybody, even people that don't even have an idea what this transhumanism is. We wake up and we kill billions of animals and we are spoiling the system. People that never heard about self-directed evolution or these things, they do it. This is an outcome of capitalism. This is an outcome of our society, or even of human nature. We can even go back to talking about human nature. We are predators. That's the problem. And so if there are billions of predators that are like enhanced by new technology, what will happen? I'm also afraid of this picture, I'm telling you. So we have to think that we need also kind of evolution from a spiritual point of view together, not just an evolution from our physical strength or health and things like that. We need a spiritual evolution. The only thing is that why you're not against, because as I said, this is something you cannot stop, because you cannot just stop, like not even capitalism. Is capitalism, socialism, anywhere, there are industrial society. We are going in a direction. It's not something we can stop with a discussion. So yes, there is this problem. Yes, you can see this problem. But even if someone say, let's say that we are certain, because we are not certain, maybe nothing happened. Maybe everything would work out very well. But let's say that even if we are certain, that we will have more aggressivity, it's not something that can really easily solve. Yes, I would like to make it clear. Yes. Especially, I cannot solve the problem. I'm just a person that is studying the problem. I'm analyzing the problem. I'm pro this technology in the sense that I'm not against. I think, but I'm not saying that we won't have any problem. No, problems, there will be new problems. But we may destroy the world even if this technology would never be invented. Yes. Mind that anytime we have like a crisis connected to technological employment, we solve it with a war. And we are facing a new one. It was the First World War, then the Second World War. Now we are facing a new problem with robots and computers replacing humans. I hope there will be a Third World War to solve this problem, but that was the solution, yes? Employ all the unemployment in the war industry. So, yeah, we have these problems, yes. We are not angels.
Thank you for your answer. It's already 5 o'clock. I wanted to give the opportunity to Professor Henry if she wants to say some last words on these final issues.
If I could very briefly, I really think that we should reframe and decenter the question of justice as well. The problem is, according to me, if you don't adopt a more critical posthumanist political approach, we can fall in the trap again of even involuntary superomistic consequences of a more still anthropocentric vision about justice, equity, and so on and so on. And we should reframe and decenter all the lemmas of the political vocabulary, especially of the West, not only, but especially of the West. And this is an open program, and I think it is a stake because we need to really try to revert the tendency to the self-destruction in terms of this dissipative vision of dissipative vision of justice, in the sense that I get something from somebody of something to give to somebody else. But the problem is we should get out of this very, in this sense, very pre-modern and very, very radical ancient paradigm of justice. How to do it? I'm really, as Ricardo said, we are starting a problem, we cannot give solution, but I think this is one of the most relevant problems. Deontologize and decentralize even the question of justice, so far as we are in the condition of doing, not without human, but changing completely the role of human in the cosmos and in relation to other things, beings, entities, and so on and so on. And this is, of course, could be, Fiorella Battal could be very happy about it. It could be a very utopistic program in this sense, but I think we should even try to reframe the vocabulary we are using now in terms of such relevant issues like justice. I don't know if I have added something to this point. In this case, I say thank you very much to Ricardo, and I mute myself again and let the last word to Claudio.
Thank you, Professor Henry, and also thank you very much, Professor Campa. This is obviously a very provocative and interesting topic, and we could discuss it for longer. I'm sorry for all of those who participated that they didn't have also the chance to read all your questions. Again, I'd like to thank Ricardo and Barbara for your very, very interesting presentations, and everybody who participated with their questions and comments. Also, I'd like to invite you to continue following our program with our next event on the 18th of May with Professor Joanna Zilinska, who would be talking about also artificial intelligence and creativity. We will be sending all of you the information in due time to register. So without anything else to add, I would like to thank you very much all for this participating in this first webinar and looking forward to the next ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank
Bye.
you, Ricardo. Thank you to everybody. Bye.